Today, we're undertaking a journey millions of years into the past, a sort of forensic examination of the sheer, often brutal reality of prehistoric death. We're basically sifting through skeletal evidence, reading these ancient crime scenes to figure out the primal threats that defined early human existence. It's a challenging task, but it's so vital. Our mission for this deep dive is to synthesize all these sources, these archaeological finds that detail human deaths across 2 million years. And we're not just here to catalog tragedies. We are looking for those profound aha moments. What does the way someone died tell us about their world, their culture, their capability? Exactly. These aren't just bones in a museum. They're stories. And they show us the incredible stakes of survival. When we really analyze how they died, we get this crucial knowledge about how they had to live. We sort of organize these challenges into the 3 big threats that stalk them: predators, internal failures like disease, and maybe the most consistent threat of all, other humans, intentional human violence. We really have to start at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak, back when existence meant facing down just pure, overwhelming force. So for our first segment, let's look at the violence of the ancient world itself, a time when we were, without a doubt, prey. And a perfect, if terrifying place to start is with the remains of 07. This was an early Homo habilis ancestor from about 1.8 million years ago. And this individual was tiny, maybe 4 feet tall, but the evidence suggests a fight that was, it was completely impossible to win. The leg bones, they tell a really brutal story. There are these massive puncture marks that forensic paleontologists have just conclusively matched to Crocodilus thorburners, which is not the crocodile we know today. Not at all. This thing was an extinct giant, absolutely titanic. We're talking it could grow over 25 feet long and weigh more than 2 tons. So 07 was almost certainly ambushed near water, which is, classic croc hunting behavior. But what is so chilling about 07's death and what makes it so unique is that the crocodile was really only half the problem. What else did the forensic team find on the skull? This is the amazing part. It's clear evidence of a simultaneous dual attack. So while the crocodile had the lower body, the back of the skull shows these long grooves, these scratches, and they match the hunting patterns of a big cat, something leopard-sized. So wait, from the water and the land at the exact same time, at the exact same moment, the sheer level of trauma and the fact there's absolutely no sign of healing on any of the bones, it confirms this was an immediate, overwhelming, and very quick end. It's true terror. Being caught between 2 different apex predators, and we tend to focus on the threats on the ground, but early humans had to constantly look up to. Which brings us to this really tragic story of the Taung child. A 3-year-old from 2 million years ago. Yeah, in South Africa. For a long, long time, the cause of death for this child's skull was, debated, but a really detailed examination revealed these very specific puncture marks, not random nicks or scrapes, but clean wounds right in both eye sockets and scratches across the facial bones. Wow, and how did they connect those precise wounds to a specific kind of predator? They matched the pattern perfectly to the injuries they see on modern monkeys and other small primates that are hunted and killed by huge, powerful hunting birds. So the conclusion is, it's inescapable. This child was grabbed and killed by a giant prehistoric eagle, so it completely rewrites our picture of early human fear. They had to worry about being literally plucked right off the ground, a threat from the sky. Exactly, and if you connect that to the bigger picture, survival wasn't just about avoiding a single killer. It was about understanding a truly multi-directional threat environment. And sometimes the threat wasn't a single giant, but a coordinated pack. Which brings us to the Pingman victims in ancient China, right? The Pingman site. This is crucial because it's not just one individual. They found the remains of over 28 early humans there, all intermingled with really striking evidence of predation, and the statistic is just staggering. 67% of the human bones had bite marks from giant hyenas, and again, these aren't the hyenas we picture today. These are pack hunters weighing well over 300 pounds, with bone-crushing heads bigger than a modern lion's. So doesn't the context of where they were found just completely flip the narrative we tell ourselves about early tool users? It absolutely does. The real shock was realizing the cave they were found in. It wasn't a human home at all. It was a giant hyena den, an enge. And the forensics showed that while the human remains had all this hyena bite damage, there were 0 hyena bones with any human tool marks, no butchery. It's conclusive proof. In ancient China at that time, early humans were actively hunted as food. They were cemented as prey, not the dominant species. And even as humanity progressed, the environment stayed brutally lethal. The threats changed. Let's jump forward to about 3,400 years ago in Japan and talk about Sukumo 24. He holds the grim title of being the first confirmed shark attack victim in human history. The details on this skeleton they're harrowing. Sukumo 24 had 790 separate V-shaped puncture wounds across his body. Chest, arms, ribs. Just everywhere. His left hand was gone. Both feet were completely missing. And initially, researchers thought these had to be from metal weapons. Right, but the Gelman culture at that time, they had no metal tools. So those V-shaped cuts, they pointed directly to a marine predator. And that number, 790 distinct wounds, what does that tell you about the attack itself? It tells us he was alive, and he was fighting actively when the attack happened. The wounds are really consistent with the feeding frenzy pattern of a big shark, probably a tiger or a great white, while he was fishing. It shows that it took a massive amount of time and violence to inflict that kind of damage. It's just a powerful reminder that while we were overcoming terrestrial threats, the ocean's danger has been there for millennia. That transition, from these external visible dangers to the internal unseen ones, is so profound you can at least try to fight a shark or a hyena. But what happens when the fight moves inside your own body? Let's move to segment 2 and focus on biological failures, microscopic enemies, and, misguided attempts at medicine. We have this really remarkable case from 1.7 million years ago that shows how a life-sustaining resource can become a slow-acting poison. This is the Homo erectus woman, KNNMER108, and her death was conclusively linked to the oldest known case of vitamin A poisoning in the entire human record. That sounds like an unbelievably agonizing way to die. What actually happens to the body during a severe vitamin A overdose? The symptoms are just devastating, and they're prolonged. They last for weeks, maybe months before death. She would have had crushing headaches, dizziness, severe joint swelling, weakness, but maybe the most horrifying detail of all is that her skin would have literally peeled off in large chunks while she was still conscious. My God, and what was the source? How did this happen back then? The source was eating too much carnivore liver. Early humans, they prized the liver. It's a valuable resource, but they didn't understand the concentration of certain things. A single apex carnivore liver-like from a big cat or a polar bear can contain a 150-year supply of vitamin A for a human. She was poisoned slowly and agonizingly by the very food source meant to keep her alive. From a dietary mistake to the microscopic terror that would go on to define so much of human history. The plague. We can actually trace our long, brutal war with this disease back 5,000 years to a young hunter-gatherer in Lafia. Right, he died around age 20. No signs of any external injury, no obvious violence. But advanced genetic testing on his remains found traces of Yersinia pestis, and that discovery established him as the first known human victim of the plague. The exact same bacterium that would later cause the Black Death, killing millions and millions of people, the very same one. His single death, probably from a rodent bite, marks the chronological beginning of this specific microscopic foe's huge influence on us. It's a defining moment where humanity steps into a new kind of vulnerability, fighting an enemy it couldn't see or even imagine. And when our ancestors weren't fighting nature or bacteria, they were fighting pain, fighting injury. And sometimes they attempted these catastrophic cures. Which brings us to the desperation we see in the French Trepanation victims. This is a really painful snapshot of ancient medicine. In France, archaeologists found the remains of about 40 people from 6500 BC who had all undergone trepanation, which is essentially brain surgery. Drilling or scraping a hole directly into the skull, often with crude tools like sharp stones or seashells, and with no sanitation, no painkillers. The risks must have been just astronomical. The results confirm it. Over 60% of the skulls they looked at showed absolutely no signs of healing, which means the patients died quickly from massive bleeding, infection, or direct brain damage right after the procedure. But what's so fascinating is that this procedure was done for thousands of years. Some skulls even have multiple healed holes, so they survived it once and went back for more, and went back for more. It just highlights the sheer desperation they must have felt to find a cure for things like chronic headaches or seizures. That is just a profound demonstration of the trade-off they were willing to make. The massive risk of death versus the certainty of just constant suffering. Okay, so we've covered predators and biological failure. But the third, and maybe the most enduring threat, is the one we consciously inflict on each other. Let's move to segment 3 and analyze deaths inflicted intentionally by other humans. We can start with organized violence and ritual murder. There's a burial site in France from 5,500 years ago, found in what looks like a Neolithic grain storage pit. The context here is everything, and the details of this specific burial are deeply, deeply disturbing. Two women were found tied up, their legs were forced up to their necks, and they were crushed under these heavy grinding stones. The position of the bodies, it strongly suggests they died from slow self-choking over a period of hours as they struggled against the ropes, and the immense weight of those stones is to ensure there was no movement, no escape. But the key piece of evidence is that the structure itself was deliberately built to line up perfectly with the sun during the summer solstice. So this wasn't just a random act of violence, this was an organized ritual sacrifice, almost certainly to bring good harvests. Given the grain pit location. And there was a third woman, right? Untied, positioned on top, as if watching over it. It raises this really important question about the dark side of early social structures. When times were tough, when food was scarce, the highest risk for some people in the community came from their own kin, formalized through these terrifying rites, and you can contrast that ritual brutality with the sheer, drawn-out suffering of Mira, the bog body from Germany. Mira was a girl, just 17 to 19 years old, who lived about 2,000 years ago, and her short life, as revealed by forensics, was just defined by pain. Her body showed signs of 2 separate healed skull fractures, clear evidence of violent attacks or really severe accidents she survived years before her death. She also had a painful spinal growth and bone changes that show she spent years carrying incredibly heavy loads, and clear signs of childhood hunger. She just carried immense suffering her whole brief life. And her death was suspicious from the start, found naked, alone in the bog, which is an environment perfect for hiding something. It certainly suggests she was dumped there, possibly to hide whatever finally killed her. And what's just so tragic here is that even in death, she couldn't escape it. When her body was discovered in 2000, modern digging equipment accidentally tore her remains into over 100 pieces. Just incredible. For our last case, let's jump across the globe for what is essentially Los Angeles' oldest cold case, the La Brea woman. She's the only prehistoric human found among tens of thousands of Ice Age animal bones of the La Brea tar pits. Right, she died 10,000 years ago. Her forensic report is clear. A fractured skull, a broken jaw, and a small, precise hole from a blunt weapon strike. It was conclusively determined to be human-inflicted, and early humans in that area knew the tar pits were death traps. They saw animals wander in and never come out. So how did investigators know for sure this was an intentional murder and not just a brutal accident where she then fell in? The analysis showed her presence wasn't just accidental. She was deliberately thrown into that well-known death trap, almost certainly to conceal the body and get rid of the evidence. It's a chilling parallel to modern criminal behavior, right? Using the environment to hide a crime. She is definitively LA's oldest known murder victim. What a monumental journey. Millions of years of human vulnerability, every single one of these stories just fundamentally shatters that idea of ancient life being simple or idyllic. Absolutely. What these diverse deaths tell us, I think, is that early human life was defined by this constant, overwhelming struggle against giant predators, against bad choices about food, against invisible microscopic enemies, and so frequently against other humans. The brutal facts are what complete the human story, showing us how terrifyingly precarious life truly was. And these deaths, even separated by millions of years, they show this powerful common thread of vulnerability. We learned to fight the lions and the crocodiles. We largely mastered those big macroscopic threats. But 2 million years later, we are still struggling fiercely with the microscopic enemies, with disease, and maybe most chillingly, with the conscious threat of human violence. And that leads to a final thought for you to consider. Given that the ultimate defining threats to human survival still include tiny pathogens and the violence of our own species, what ancient vulnerability have we truly overcome? What lesson from the sheer terror faced by O7 or the agony endured by Canon MER 108 is still profoundly relevant to our world today? We really encourage you to seek out more information on the history of ancient survival.